And the United States has hailed progress made during Ukraine peace talks in Geneva. A joint statement released by the United States and Ukraine unveiled an updated peace framework that upholds Ukraine's sovereignty. The United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio led the American delegation in Geneva on Sunday, meeting with Ukrainian and European officials to discuss a cessation of hostilities that began with Russia's invasion in February 2022. The framework revised a previous 28-point plan that had required Ukraine to cede territory, reduce its armed forces, and renounce NATO ambition. These were terms that Kyiv had rejected and sought changes to. Striking an optimistic chord, Rubio said that U.S. was making changes to the peace plan based on Ukraine's suggestion so as to come to an agreement.
We arrived here today with one goal, and the goal was to take, is 28 points or 26 points, depending on which version as it continued to evolve, and try to narrow the ones that were open items. And we have achieved that today in a very substantial way. So I feel very optimistic that we're going to get there in a very reasonable period of time very soon. Our goal is to end this war as soon as possible, but we need a little more time.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the talks with U.S. and Switzerland to achieve peace in Ukraine were substantive and that U.S. President Donald Trump's team is hearing Ukraine's concerns.
The delegation has just reported on the results of their discussions, and these were substantive conversations. A lot is changing. We are working very carefully on the steps needed to end the war. It is important that there is dialogue with the American representatives, and there are signals President Trump's team is hearing us.
According to reports, U.S. and Ukrainian officials also discussed a potential visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to Washington to meet Trump as early as this week following the Geneva talks. Sources say the trip, which is yet to be confirmed, would focus on the most sensitive parts of the plan, especially territorial issues. Meanwhile, on the war front, Russian forces staged a massive drone attack on Sunday on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. A video release showed emergency services working to extinguish flames and recover bodies in the aftermath of the attack. According to the mayor, at least 4 people were killed in strikes, while 17 were injured. 15 strikes were recorded in 6 areas of the city in northeastern Ukraine. The governor of Dnipropetrovsk region, farther south, said 2 people were killed in a Russian strike on the town of Marninets. And for more on this, we are now being joined live by Ivan Kachanovsky from Ottawa in Canada. He's a political scientist at the University of Ottawa. Thank you so much for joining on the broadcast. Now, we hear after the Geneva talks that Rubio says tremendous progress has been made at Ukraine peace talks and hopes for a deal very soon. How positive do you think these talks look at this stage?
Thank you for the invitation. I followed these talks very in detailed way because of the importance, but I think based on information which was just made public recently in the last hour or so, it is still not clear what kind of changes, what kind of modifications were made to this plan which was proposed by Donald Trump. And I think most likely such modifications would involve concessions to the Ukrainian side, to the side which is represented by Ukrainian delegation, and this would likely make Russia much less likely to accept such a peace plan with Ukrainian modifications. So I think Russia would demand their own modifications or changes to the plan and would reject a lot of changes and modifications which were made by Ukrainian side and accepted by American side.
And where does this leave Europeans? Because when we look at the concessions, we know that Rubio has said that it's about 26 or 28 points. He said this depending on which version they continue to evolve. And we are looking at, this is not the final stage. Of course, there are going to be talks, and we are expecting Zelensky to go to Washington again. Now, these talks are also taking place between Ukraine, U.S., and, of course, European allies. Russia is not there. How do you see Russia looking at these talks?
I think European countries and leaders of Europe, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom suggested their own plan, which which comprised 24 points. And this plan, which was specifically and direct counter plan against the plan which was suggested by Donald Trump, suggested points or included points which would be, I think, which would have almost zero chance of being accepted by Russia, because they said that there would be no ban on NATO membership of Ukraine, no admission of any territorial annexation by Russia, and there would be also no withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass area, which is controlled by Ukrainian forces. So I think this European plan is just wishful or kind of quite delusional view, which is represented by Europe, because it has no real chance of being implemented. I think this plan basically is a way to try to prolong this war, which is unwinnable for Ukraine and has devastating consequences to Ukraine, to Ukrainians, and which is again a terrible problem for Ukraine, and a lot of Ukrainians would suffer this winter because of Russian attacks on energy infrastructure and significant losses of Ukrainian military forces. And Russia is able to just take more cities in Donbass. So in any way, I think situation with Ukraine is not very optimistic based on my research and based on evidence which is publicly available.
And do you think that, considering that Russia has been attacking several cities, it has just recently attacked Kharkiv, looking at the current situation on the battlefield, do you think that Ukraine actually has time to even go for negotiations, or should it? How do you think Ukraine will take a look at this? Because as Ukraine delays, it seems like Russia is again on the battlefield. They keep taking these different parts of Ukraine. What is your opinion on that?
Yes, I researched this very closely, and I just published recently a book on the Russia-Ukraine war. And based on recent developments in Donbass and in areas close to Donbass, Russia was able to gradually capture more territory of Ukraine, and it recently was able basically to capture city of Pokrovsk and encircle of Ukrainian troops in Mirnograd city, nearby city. And so Russia also constantly attacks Ukraine by drones, by missiles, and this happens every night. And there are attacks on energy infrastructure and on power stations, on gas infrastructure, and a lot of people again affected by these attacks. So I think this would have a very negative impact on Ukraine, and the longer the war would continue, the more negative consequences for Ukraine would be, and any peace deal which would be accepted by Ukraine in the future would be on much worse terms which are available right now. So I think Zelensky has to make a choice between two kind of conditions. One is to accept such a deal on bad terms, or to risk total capitulation of Ukraine and total defeat of Ukraine, which can happen if the war would continue, because now even the United States support is in doubt if Ukraine would reject such a peace plan suggested by Donald Trump.
Right, and absolutely. I was actually come to that, because U.S. President Donald Trump had said earlier that Ukraine's leaders have shown zero gratitude over U.S. efforts to end the war. How flexible do you think U.S. can be in these negotiations with Ukraine?
I think United States is basically a patron of Ukraine since this conflict started in 2014, and during the Russian invasion, or since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So United States basically has a tough choice as well, because on one side they try to act as a mediator in this peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. On the another side, they have obligations to Ukraine as a client state of the United States. And so in this case, the United States, new administration of US under Donald Trump stated that they would stop supplies of weapons to Ukraine, and they did this, but they continue to provide intelligence support. They continue to provide military supplies via European Union countries or United Kingdom and other countries which support Ukraine. So in this case, I think this situation when such support of the United States can end if Zelensky would reject peace plan. But I think based on the recent outcome of peace talks talks between the United States and Ukraine in Geneva, this is not very likely now because Zelensky basically agreed to accept some points of Trump plan, but amend or modify other points of this plan. So I think Trump is not very likely to suspend all United States support for Ukraine in the immediate future, but this can always happen, and again, and such support in any way is declining.
Right, absolutely. Of course, we'll have to wait and see if we see any negotiations or if we see Zelensky going back to Washington and what comes out of that. But thank you so much for joining on the broadcast and giving all your insights into this.
Thank you.